In capitalism, capital is everything. In capital, let me say that again. We're going to process something that's a very basic idea. It's going to sound super basic when I say it, but that's great. The best way to get to the deep stuff is to make it as basic as possible. The most important and most empowering thing you can have in a capitalist society is capital. You got two types of people in a capitalist society. You've got those who have capital and those who do not have capital. Those who do not have capital have to serve those who own capital in order for them to survive. In fact, in some cases, not only are you serving the people who have capital, but you actually are capital that is owned by the capitalists. So by you giving your children that little stock portfolio at an early age, getting them started and off on the right foot, you are putting them in a position where they're not going to be owned by a capitalist because they actually own capital. And it's really basic. It's really that simple. Because when you have capital, you have an endowment. The endowment is what allows you to be free. The reason that for all your life, you've been trained to believe that you have to get up and go to work for a white man every day is because you had no capital. You had no endowment. If there was $100,000, $200,000 in the bank somewhere that you could live off of, live off the interest or whatever the case may be, you wouldn't have to go to work. If your parents left you an apartment building and you were collecting rent every month from all the tenants in the apartment building, you wouldn't have to go to work. If you had a bunch of stocks that were paying dividends or you were able to sell options on the stock, then you wouldn't have to go to work. So the reason that you have to go to work is because you don't own the capital. You are the capital. The capitalist owns you, right? So when people say that capitalism is a form of slavery, they're not exaggerating. Capitalism in its worst form becomes slavery because slavery is basically the lack of choice. It's when you can't do what you want to do. That's what slavery means. Slavery does not mean that you're not paid. You can still be paid and be a slave. Slavery is a lack of freedom. Freedom means what? Being able to do what you want to do. Well, you grow up in a culture that says, well, I would like to do this, but I can't because I got to go to work. Or I'd like to speak up on this issue, but I can't because I'm going to lose my job. Or I'd like to live in this city, but I can't because the only job I can get is in Kansas, right? So by you doing that little thing for your children early, buying them shares of stock on a consistent basis and putting them in a position to be owners of capital in their 20s, you're freeing them up to actually live their lives to the absolute fullest. When people talk about living their best life, one of the elements that allows you greatest access to your best life is the ownership of capital, because what that then does is it allows you to pay your bills and get what you need so you can then focus on the things that matter instead of doing what most of us are trained to do, which is to obsess yourself and spend all of your free time doing the things you need to do in order to survive because you don't have a capital base you can lean on. So that 401k, for many of us who were not left any capital, you're supposed to have capital in your inheritance, right? That's why all of you in here are going to have life insurance policies for your children. If you don't have it, I encourage you to get one right away. A lot of you are going to leave stock for your children. Some of you are going to leave real estate for your children. Try to get your house paid off. My parents, this week, my parents we finished paying that house off. And that made my father very, very proud. Some of you are going to have businesses that you leave your children. That's a whole nother conversation as well that we'll get to in the Black Wealth Bootcamp, because sometimes you have a great business and your kids don't want to take it over. So the question becomes, what is your succession plan? A lot of Black-owned businesses don't have a succession plan. And so the business dies with the business owner. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I'm going to give you some ideas on how to overcome that. So family and friends, equity versus debt. The reason I put that in here is because when you're talking about, raising money for your business, there are some situations where you will give equity, which is ownership. That's all equity is its ownership. There are some situations where you'll give some ownership and some situations where you don't want to share ownership at all. And the defining factor that comes into play as to whether or not you share ownership or don't share ownership, a lot of times will come down to what they call risk sharing. So let me give you an example where I want to share ownership in a business and an example where I don't want to share ownership. Let's say that I've got a business venture that I think might work out, but I'm not really sure. It's very risky, very expensive, and I don't want to pay all the costs by myself. I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't want to get burned by myself. In that case, I want to have partners because I want to share the risk. That's what they call risk sharing. Now, that's a situation where I want to share ownership of the project. I'd say, hey, I'll take 50%, you take 50%. That way, we both take 50% of the risk, and we get 50% of the reward. Well, a situation where I don't want to share ownership, where I might lean toward debt, like debt is where you borrow from a bank or from your credit card or from yourself or from a relative. Someone who gives you debt, they don't usually want a percentage of the business. They just want you to pay back the debt and pay back the interest, right? So the times where I don't want to partner and where I'll take on debt would be situations where it's an economic slam dunk. Like, so let's say, for example, I've got a business and I already know that the money's coming in. There's no risk involved. I just need some capital to kind of get things moving. So, for example, I want to start a bakery, and I've already got a company that's promised me $100,000 cookie contract. All I got to do is set up shop. All I got to do is be able to deliver the cookies. Well, I don't need to share the cookies with anybody. I can just go to a bank or wherever the case may be, or my credit card or wherever, and borrow the money, and then go buy the equipment myself. And I'm the complete owner. Maybe I allow for a debt holder, but I don't need a partner in that particular case because there's no risk to be shared, right? So equity versus debt, those are some examples of where you might decide one or the other. And then the third way you can get money actually for business actually is just to use your own money. A lot of people make the assumption that debt is always bad. That is not true. There are some situations where debt is good. A lot of times using your own money is not the optimal strategy because what you're doing then is you're threatening your own cash flow. And so, for example, most business owners that, like people, billionaire types, the Donald Trump types of the world, the Oprah Winfrey's of the world, when they do a new business venture, they don't use their own money. Like Oprah doesn't go into her bank account and pull out $20 million to start a new business. Oprah will still go to the bank and borrow $20 million, even though, that's, I don't know, maybe 2% of her net worth or 1%. I don't know what the number is. But, basically, the reason they do it that way is because when they take on debt, most of the risk is actually on the debt holder. So if you take on the business venture and you borrow from a bank or whomever, if the business fails and the business goes belly up and bankrupt, then the bank is going to lose their money, but you're not going to lose anything or you're beyond what you put into the business. You'll lose what you put into the business, but you won't lose anything else. That's what limited liability means. So that's why Oprah isn't going to use her own money. Oprah is going to share the risk with somebody else. She's going to let the bank take on a big chunk of the financing. So human capital is great. What is human capital? Human capital is is you. It's your skill. It's your relationships. It's the skill and relationships of the people around you. That's a great source of capital. So never think that because your business doesn't have money that you don't have wealth. Remember, human capital is a very valuable type of wealth. That's why white folks have been paying you so much your whole life, is because they need your human capital. That's how America got built. America was built on Black human capital. And by the way, I saw someone asking about the recording. Yeah, the recording should be in there. If you log in at blackwealthbootcamp.com, you should be able to find the recording of all the previous lectures that we've done so far, blackwealthbootcamp.com. Also, keep checking your email. I'll email you guys to remind you of our Thursday meetings at 8 o'clock. It's the same time every week. And also, in case you don't get the email, just come on in here Thursday nights at 8 o'clock and I'll be here. Okay.